Welcome back to this week's Live Your Dreams Awake. I am joined today by the beautiful, amazing Prema Gaia, and I'm super, super grateful to have Prema on today. She is a most inspiring, wonderful, gifted soul. We have the pleasure of being in a mastermind together. Next year, we'll be in Necker Island with Richard, who has just gone to space. I'm like, now I'm going to meet someone who's been to space as well. So that's how I've met Prema. We're an amazing group of incredible women, and she definitely has a beautiful sparkle in her heart and has an amazing journey, which I feel like will be just so inspirational for people who want to connect more with their spirit and their soul and just follow their heart. And that's what I feel like Prema definitely does. So I know this is not very official, and I didn't really tell people what you do, Prema, but maybe you could introduce yourself about what you do and how you help people, because that was like pretty vague.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much, Patricia. It's such an honor to be here with you and super excited to get a chance to share with you today a little bit about my journey and what has led me to be here living in Costa Rica and the work that I'm doing right now with the Soulful Women Entrepreneurs Convergence. So I'd love to share a little bit about my background and what led me onto the path that I'm on today. So in my childhood, I ended up having experiences that led me onto a path of deep soul searching and deep inquiry around healing and personal transformation and empowerment. And so when I was in my teens, I hadn't yet found the tools and the practices to help empower myself and to help with my personal growth. And so I had, in my early years from around 15 to 25, I had a phase where I ended up getting into a party lifestyle and using alcohol and recreational drugs. Basically, I say that I put my soul on ice for that decade. So I had a decade of kind of distracting and numbing. During that phase in time, I ended up moving to Los Angeles, and I began working in the modeling industry and the entertainment industry, doing TV commercials and music videos, but I still hadn't learned how to love myself. So I had this glamorous life back then where I was going to A-list celebrity clubs 5 times a week, hanging out at Hollywood Hills house parties with celebrities. And I was getting backstage passes to everything, flying in private planes, and had this very exciting life. At that time, I based my self-worth a lot on the external. And I enjoyed the lifestyle to some extent, but I had self-destructive behaviors that just were not sustainable. I was exercising sometimes like 5 hours a day and really not eating all that much, and using recreational drugs and alcohol just to kind of keep my pain and my trauma on ice until I could find the path that would lead me to blossom into my full soul potential. So in
Wow.
2000,
That's
yeah.
amazing. I love the way you talk about putting your soul on ice. And, I often find when people and come on as guests on the show that we have such synergistic kind of stories. And I've never heard about like putting my soul on ice, but I definitely did the same. So it's just so interesting to hear this. But like, I never knew about like that Hollywood lifestyle that you led.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Yeah,
yeah, like I didn't know any about that. So this is like new for me. And everyone's like, wow, she was on A-list parties. And it's
yeah.
so fascinating when you hear this and you hear people about like, oh, well, I was doing all these things that kind of are on people's vision boards and then not
Totally.
fulfilled.
Yeah.
I'm like, so what was like the turning point for you?
It was a lifestyle that really did give me a lot of validation on certain levels, but I didn't receive the deep soul nourishment and the reflections of my value for who I am, in a deep way. It was just sort of more of a surface level. And it was, on some level, it was so fun and it was so fascinating just being at those parties with just filled with like all the biggest name celebrities, and being in the VIP lounge at the VIP club. It was something that I felt like a lot of my friends back home were like, wow, Prema, this is amazing that you get to have this lifestyle. And I did feel kind of like it was a very special opportunity to get a peek backstage to the lifestyles of so many people that had grown up watching them on TV and admiring them and looking up to them. And so slowly but surely, the more time that I spent in that environment, the more that I realized that what I was looking for was not to be found there. Although there was a part of me that was so attached to that world because it was exciting, it was glamorous, it was compelling, it was fascinating, you know? And so what ended up happening was I actually was in Barcelona and I was dating a very wealthy man at the time. He was actually a billionaire. And we flew from Barcelona to England, to London. And I ended up going and visiting an old friend in England. And this friend, he had had a radical transformation. And he told me that he had given away a lot of his possessions. He had started doing these 10-day silent meditation retreats, Vipassana retreats, which many of you may have heard of or maybe been to some of these retreats. And he told me that he did not care if he ever had sex again. He just, all he cared about was his spiritual liberation and his transformational path. That was all he cared about. And I was just in awe because I had never met anyone in my life that was so devoted to their soul and so devoted to their evolution and their transformation. And I was just so touched, so deeply, deeply touched. And I asked him, I was like, I have to know more about what has catalyzed this change. And he said he would give me a book about meditation if I would read it. And he kind of looked at me dubiously because he didn't think that I would actually take the time to read it. But I was like, no, I have to have the book. I have to have it. And so he gave it to me. And then I went back to London and I ended up meeting up with an old friend from high school and ended up doing what I used to do at those times to process intense emotions, which was I went out and I got drunk. And so the next morning I was hungover and I ended up missing my flight. So I was stuck in the airport in London with for 24 hours. This is in 2001, before Wi-Fi was how it is today. And I was stuck there for 24 hours with nothing to do and nothing to pass the time, except I remembered that I had this book about meditation and spirituality. So I ended up reading the entire book from cover to cover, and my jaw just dropped. And I was like, my entire life, as I know it, has been based on an illusion. It's been based on sort of surface level living that has nothing to do with why my soul came here. And I realized that these self destructive patterns with my relationship with food and exercising and drugs and alcohol, that these things all had to change. I was self sabotaging and everything had to change. And so that was a turning point moment. And my whole life changed after that.
Isn't that just amazing how the people come into your life like that? I think we all have those. Well, I had those people as well in that toxic life when the yoga teacher came in to the bar that I was running, and I said, "Do you have yoga classes? Like, are you teaching yoga?" He said, "Yeah, I've won this evening." And I said, "Oh, what time?" 7 o'clock. And he just literally even said in his mind, "She's never going to turn up."
Right.
She's never gonna, it's like your friend with the book. She's never gonna read it. I'll give you the book, but you're not gonna read it.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking you. I sat on that yoga mat that day. I ran in a bit late and he was just like so surprised to see me. I never missed another one of his classes, but he sat there and he goes, "And this is an hour for you." And the tears rolled down my eyes. And it was like life changing. Like
Totally.
these people that we just are like we're in our surroundings. So that's amazing that the book and the airport having to be there to read it. So tell
Yeah.
me, like, so I know this is just kind of like the start of your journey in many ways.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I remember my first big emotional release on a yoga mat where I just could not stop the tears from just gushing and gushing. And it's so interesting because I know now that that is part of what yoga class is for. But
Mm.
in my mindset at the time, I was so shamed that I had been crying and crying in yoga class that I asked myself, I was like, I don't know if I can go back to that yoga studio. I'm embarrassed. Like, it's just so extraordinary to think back on just how out of touch I was with how important my feelings are and how relevant it is what I'm feeling and how that is part of my inner compass, my inner navigation system. My feelings are so important, and that is part of what guides my intuition now.
This is
After that,
definitely important for people, I think, even listening, that
mhm,
like you were talking about the sabotaging things for people listening, like, when you do feel an emotion, like what's your reaction? Like, is it to the fridge? Is it to the glass of wine? Is
exactly.
it to
Mhm.
the exercise? Is it to like a yelp at your children? Like, what is it? And then seeing like, like that's, and just witnessing it, like it's not and just being aware of it, and then be like, oh, that's interesting, look what happens. Instead of me allowing myself to process my emotions, I go to the fridge.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And so after that first spiritual awakening back in 2001, I ended up getting very much into Vipassana meditation retreats and yoga. And I became a raw vegan and started really getting into a much more health conscious, holistic lifestyle. And I lived that path for several years. And the one interesting thing was, which some of the people listening may relate, was I started developing a belief system that the one meditation lineage that I had discovered was going to be the path that was going to provide all the answers that my soul needed. And all I needed to do was just align myself to the letter with every single thing that those books and that my meditation teachers told me. This meditation lineage was the highest path. And if I just kept applying myself, I would have the emotional healing and the spiritual liberation and all the things were going to come from that one path. And as many of the people listening know, we don't come here to this world to find one path that's going to give us all the answers. It's not so straightforward. I look back to my innocence and just my naivete and like, okay, I'll just do, let me read the book another time, and exactly how should I behave, and like how long should I be celibate for, and how many hours should I meditate a day, and all these things. And so I had my second spiritual awakening was based on an experience where I just realized at a certain point, it just dawned on me so strongly that I was not going to find every single answer for my soul purpose and for my personal evolution and understanding why I came here to this planet and what I'm meant to bring and who I'm meant to be and what I'm meant to share. I wasn't going to find that by just following one lineage to the letter. And so in 2006, I received really, really clear guidance to give away all of my possessions, every single thing I had accumulated for 30 years. And so I ended up doing that. And what I did is I went to the downtown area of the town I was living in, and I set up like a blanket with all my stuff on it, and it was like a free market with my rollerblades and my stereo, my shoes, and all my possessions. And I people would walk by, and I was just like, just take anything you want. I'm just letting it all go. It was like a
Oh my
really
God.
I literally gave away every single thing that I had accumulated for 30 years because my guidance was that I needed to reset and start an entirely new chapter. And this was during my Saturn return. It start an entirely new chapter and build from the ground up. And that everything that I had been anchoring myself to was based on me trying to live other people's dreams, or maybe my mom's dreams, or my father's visions for my life, or just different societal things that I had seen on television, like this is what success is. And my soul came through really strong and started speaking to me literally in the form of inner guidance, like an inner voice. And I had never had anything happen like that before. And I didn't really have context for it. So I was like, what is going on? But it just became louder and louder. And up until that point, I was still in a place where I was still carrying a lot of deep emotional pain. And I just knew that there was going to be something that was going to help me to heal and to empower myself and to transform and to step onto my true soul path. So I gave away every single thing till I literally only had the clothes on my back. And then I started walking.
I absolutely love this. And it just reminds me, I'm just like, I don't know your full story. So this is so fun for me because the listeners know that when I was just doing my Saturn return, I let go of everything. I wrote off my car, like, and moved to India. So
Yep.
you started walking, I moved to India. I love this. And I'm like, where did you walk? Like, what did
Yeah.
you do? Like, did you have money in your bank account?
Yeah. So, so what I did at that time was I was guided to just have, it was a pretty extreme sadhana or spiritual practice of just I gave away what money I had left. I gave it away, donated it. And then I started walking. And so I actually didn't use money or didn't touch money for 7 months. This was in 2006. So very unusual path.
Yes.
But I walked all the way from San Marcos, Texas, all the way across the border to Mexico because I had two main goals and visions that were guiding my pilgrimage. One was that I wanted to learn how to live off of the land, and I wanted to see if it was possible to completely sustain myself from living off of the land, to get back in touch with the cycles of nature, to get back in touch with wildcrafting food and with sleeping outside and with the stars and the bird songs and everything. I was just like, I've got to get back in touch with my relationship with Mother Earth. And the second one was that I knew enough about the lives of mystics and wisdom teachers to know that since the beginning of time, there's always been sages and saints living on the planet in every culture. And so I was thinking to myself, I want to meet the sages and the wisdom holders and the way showers that are alive on the planet now. I want to learn from them. I want to study with them, and I want to see how they can help me to liberate myself from suffering, liberate myself from the pain that I had been carrying my entire life. And then if I could learn how to liberate myself, then I was dedicated to sharing that with as many people as I could.
I love that. I absolutely love it. It's just so fascinating. So tell us a bit about this walk.
Yeah. So the walk was really so special. It was one of the most special experiences of my life. I walked 350 miles. The most I ever walked in one day was 30 miles. There was a bit of a learning curve because my legs got super sore
Mm.
at first, but then they actually just got used to it. So it was amazing. It was basically an initiation in how to follow and trust my guidance and to trust that I'm protected and guided at all times and to listen to my intuition. And so I would just walk to different towns. Certain times there would be people that would pass me on the highway, and then they would pass me on the highway like 8 hours later, and they'd be like, I saw you this morning at 8 and you're still walking. What are you doing?
I'm sure.
And the first couple of days were a big test of faith
Mhm.
because my legs got really sore. And then in one day, I had three different police cars pull over and be like, are you okay? What are you doing? And I was like, I'm on a spiritual pilgrimage. Like, but I didn't tell them that. But it was a big test of faith. But then the day after the big test of faith came at that time the hugest breakthrough in my entire life. And it was all because I took the leap of faith and I summoned the courage to do what my soul was guiding me to do. So, what ended up happening was I met a group of people that I felt were soul family and soul tribe who they felt that they recognized me and they knew me. And one of the people was looking at me with tears in his eyes, and he said, I've missed you. I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm so happy to have found you again. And another one was said, this is so extraordinarily inspiring what you're doing. He was like, this is proof that the Aquarian age is really coming. This is so amazing. And this group of people, they just took me in and they sang to me and they fed me and they were like, what do you need? How can we support you? They just
Wow.
got what I was doing. They really got it. So the difference was when I was receiving validation and acknowledgement in my Hollywood days. I was receiving validation and acknowledgement on, oh, I love your dress. Wow, you look really fit, or your abs look really great, or whatever. And none of that was touching the depths of my heart and my soul. Nobody was fully authentically seeing me for who I was. And why is that? It's because I wasn't showing who I authentically was. So by removing all of these layers of illusion and social masks, removing all of these masks and all of these layers, I made myself to be visible for the first time in my life by my soul family. And so it was the first time in my entire life that I had an encounter where I felt like, this is soul family. These people know me, they get me. And I was crying tears of joy. Like, if you can imagine someone who came from a childhood, I had very low self-esteem when I was a child. And that's why I numbed myself from the age of 15 to 25. I numbed myself because I had low self-esteem and I had a lot of pain and trauma. And so, if you can imagine what it feels like for the first time in your life to be authentically seen for who you are at soul level, that was worth more than all the gold in the world to me. So that was just a massive breakthrough for my heart and for my soul.
Beautiful. And that was just at the beginning of your journey. So
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
kept going. Like, people give you food? Did you, like, this is, I think I'm just answering the questions like people will be asking, like, oh, so you're just walking. Do people give you
Totally.
food? Did you ask
Totally.
for food? Or, the sadness, like,
How does that work? Yeah, I know.
how
How
does
does
that
that
work?
work? So, yeah, I ended up discovering so many things that I never, ever, ever would have discovered if I hadn't followed my guidance to do this pilgrimage. So, I ended up discovering this whole movement that a lot of people don't know about, but it's called free culture. And so I ended up plugging in with this movement, and I met people who were very immersed in this free culture movement. I met these people in Oregon, actually, and there was this whole movement around um, food resource recovery. So recovering, especially in the United States, there are millions of dollars worth of high quality food thrown out by places like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and all these things. And so there's this entire network, free culture network, that retrieves these things and then redistributes them in parks and different community hubs. And so I ended up plugging in with the free culture movement. After my walking pilgrimage, I ended up hitchhiking over 20,000 miles, again visiting spiritual
Wow.
teachers, visiting sages, visiting shamans, going to ashrams of any different tradition, going to monasteries, going to gompas, temples, all, and studying the world's wisdom traditions and healing arts. And the one question that I continued asking people all the time was, who are the most awakened people you've ever met? What are the most inspirational and evolutionary communities? What are some of the most healing and uplifting experiences you've ever had? And from there, I would just hitchhike and hitchhike and hitchhike all across North America and Mexico. So Canada, US, and Mexico. And that lasted about 5 years. And I learned so much, as you can imagine, by just always gathering knowledge and information about these different wisdom teachers and these different communities, these different intentional communities, and these different retreat centers and healing centers. And at one point during the journey, I joined a Zen meditation community, and
Okay.
we were meditating for probably 8 or 9 hours a day, and then doing qigong and spiritual practices all the time. So I shaved my head, and I I had read these books talking about the path of brahmacharya, which means renunciation, and
Yeah.
I took on this belief that if I was a renunciant, I would attain my goal of liberating myself more quickly, or in a more direct way. That if I would be on the path of brahmacharya, renunciation and celibacy, and having little or no possessions, that would help me to attain my goal of finding inner peace and healing my heart and all these things.
So Prima, like, what called you back? Because,
Yes.
like, now you're part of the collective with all of us and entrepreneur stuff. So I'm like, okay, it's a big difference.
I know. I know. How did the worlds get bridged? Well, there's this full circle loop that's so fascinating, that ended up unfolding. In 2012, I received clear guidance that my time in that renunciant lifestyle was over, and that it was time to move back actually to Los Angeles. And I was just so shocked when I kept hearing so clearly, move back to Los Angeles. I was like, wow, I've gotten so used to being out in the forest, doing these long solo forest retreats, being with the wild animals. I was living in New Mexico on and off a lot of the time. And I had just gotten so fond of that lifestyle that spirit guided me to come back into Los Angeles and start studying leadership, marketing, coaching, and entrepreneurship. So since 2012 up till now, I've been very deeply immersed in that whole world. And I really have started to understand now why spirit guided me on this path, because now I have the opportunity to support soul guided entrepreneurs and visionaries in bringing their bodies of work out into the world in a way that will help co create a more equitable, sustainable, kind, and beautiful world for everyone. And so that is what I'm passionate about doing now, is bridging the worlds of everything that I learned from my spiritual practices and the chapter of life that I focused on, the healing arts, and bridging that with entrepreneurship, so that entrepreneurship, in the way that I like to teach with my clients, is an integrative experience. It's infused with your soul's purpose and what you came here to do, and why you came to this planet, what you came to bring to the collective for the benefit of all beings.
Yeah, totally. And you know what's so fascinating? I think that also for me with this work and, both of your journey and even my own, is just that when you're an entrepreneur, and when you're in this, like it's a spiritual journey. Now we're in the age of Aquarius, like it's spiritual businesses is what is being called for, and it's businesses, and it's not just spiritual business. It's like business has to be done a different way, and we have to have people. We have to be the visionaries that can facilitate it, but also be able to hold space for people who are going through deep processes in the journey of entrepreneurship, because it is going to bring up every shadow,
Yeah,
everything every block. I just find, like, I just go into launch mode going, and what are we going to heal and clear this time?
exactly.
It's that's that, like, there's a lot of that, being able to hold space for that for people. So and having that deep connection with the earth, and you've had that deep connection with the earth, and I do the same with the feng shui. It's like all about bringing the five elements, balancing connection to nature into the homes of those people. So it's beautiful synergy. So it is. Prema, this has been so amazing to hear your journey. And I kind of want to have like a separate like interview of just like, who were the most amazing people you met? What were the funniest stories you have? Like, we should have like a whole
Oh my
separate.
gosh, I have some such funny stories, Patricia. I have the wildest stories. It would be really fun. I would love to come back on again and share.
The wildest stories, to be like, okay, now we've heard a journey. Now I want to hear about the year walking.
Yes.
Because I feel like similar with them, the Camino de Santiago, when I did the Camino. And
Nice.
it was just this, like, the people who came, the people you talked to, what they said, how it all worked
Mm,
out. It
yeah.
was just, it's like there's magic at work when you're on any pilgrimage. And I don't even know whether it matters whether you're on an actual pilgrimage or you've decided just like yourself. So it's beautiful. I know you're doing something really exciting for female entrepreneurs coming up. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I am co hosting a free virtual retreat with some of the most inspiring, pioneering entrepreneurial thought leaders that I know. And there's actually a number of women who are part of mastermind collective group that Patricia and I are in. There's Nikki Clinch, who is a Hay House author and maturation coach. She'll be there. And Leah Kaufman, who is a world renowned YouTube educator and somatic guide. And then Kimberly DeMos Santos, she has a profit growth agency for purpose guided entrepreneurs. And Himalaya, Betsy Finkelhu, there's some amazing, amazing teachers, powerhouse ladies. And we're offering a free 3-day virtual retreat. It's 3 hours a day for 3 days. And it is intended to help inspire and empower women who are called onto the path of soulful entrepreneurship to take the next step in leveraging their businesses for the maximum impact and income. So I would love to invite anyone who feels called to be there to join us. And the website is soulfulwomenentrepreneurs.com.
Perfect. I love that. So soulfulwomenentrepreneurs.com. That sounds like an amazing couple of days with some incredible women. So I would definitely encourage people to go check that out. Thank you so much, Prema, for coming and joining us today and for sharing your story. I definitely know I've like a million more questions to ask you. And I feel like we also need a separate one on like, what are the healing things and where did you go and what ashrams and where, because I love all of that as well. And I, from the very beginning, your comment around there's not just one straight path. And for me, it started with yoga and I was like, yoga is the answer. Actually, no,
Totally.
so many things, but it was just amazing to talk to you and to hear your story. To everyone listening, thank you so much for being here. Come and follow myself and Prema on social media. We're love to hear what your aha moments are. If you had one of those Saturn returns that changed your whole life, come and tell us. We'd love to hear, because I think it's so nice. And if you're going through a time, and if people are listening going, what's a Saturn return? It's just a period of big transformation that we often go through, and that everyone goes through them, but we may not, sometimes they're not the same. Myself and Prema's were quite spiritual awakenings. Other people have babies or get married or, or get divorced, or something big dramatic happens in their life, just so people are listening going, what's a Saturn return? I don't know what she's talking about. But in the meantime, thank you for listening. Thank you, Prema, for being here. And everybody, I would love if you can like the show, give us some 5-star ratings, share it with your friends if you enjoyed this. And if you are going through some transition period, come reach out and let us know. And I hope this episode of the show inspired you to just follow your intuition. Thanks a million. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.